Thank you and warm welcome. Please meet board member Jacob Stengel.
Thank you, Liselotte. Welcome to this webinar hosted by Boards Impact Forum in proud collaboration with our strategic partners, FCG Group, GLA Piper, Prime Webber Shandwick, the Swedish Academy of Board Directors, Board Network, and Boardman from Finland. Next, please. We are very proud to present to you a very, very distinguished panel. First of all, we will have a keynote by distinguished INSEAD Associate Professor Martin Roll, followed by a panel discussion between Martin and two very experienced chairman and non-executive directors, Peter Ahlström and Lena Hofsberger, moderated by my colleague from Boards Impact Forum, Liselotte Engström. Next, please. As you probably know, our theme for today is success across generations, leading family businesses, business boards with sustainable impact. It's very much down our alley of the Nordic Boards Impact Forum, in proud collaboration with the Climate Governance Initiative under the World Economic Forum. Very brief, well, you're hearing the introduction now. You will soon hear the findings and thoughts by Martin Roll, and then we will have the moderated discussion afterwards. We do encourage you to share your experience on social media using the hashtags of #Boards Impact Forum or #Climate Governance. There will be an option for you to post questions via the Q&A facility in Zoom, and our operations director will help handle that. Finally, please do take this opportunity either now or preferably later to actually sign up and join the Boards Impact Forum. There are a number of links there, and we will share them with you afterwards as well. Next, please. The Boards Impact Forum is the Nordic chapter of the Climate Governance Initiative. It is being conducted in collaboration with World Economic Forum, and the purpose is to engage board directors in the Nordics and internationally to accelerate the climate action and innovation for sustainable business and a sustainable world. We will have surveys with report feedback to be shared. We will also have two upcoming seminars that we also hope to see you on. First one is on June 30th on sustainability leadership, a Swedish approach to transforming your company, your industry, and the world, in collaboration with the Climate Governance Initiative chapter from Malaysia. Very interesting. And on August 26th, we will have a panel discussion on the competence for strategic sustainable business. Next, please. And by this, I hand it over to Liselotte Engström, our moderator for the day, who will introduce our speaker, Martin Roll, for you. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and warm welcome everybody, and warm welcome also to our speakers and panelists. I'm so glad to be able to introduce Martin Roll to you. Martin and I actually met at INSEAD, and Martin is now an INSEAD Distinguished Fellow, specifically in this area of family business, where he supports the organization around that. He is a senior advisor to many companies across the world. He is also partly Asian and stationed in Singapore. We are super glad to have him, and almost as I didn't know it when we were at INSEAD, Martin is actually Danish, so he's also Nordic. So he will understand the dimensions between the Nordic and the rest of the world. So without further ado, Martin, warm welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Liselotte. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks to all of you in the audience taking your time out here to discuss family business and sustainability. Truly a very, very exciting topic. Next slide. You will see a lot of content in the following 15 minutes. You will get a link in the end of my presentation where you can download it, and it will also be sent out by the board's impact forum. So don't worry about it. You will see a plethora of models and insights, and hopefully that's also gonna instill some energy into our discussion. The reason why I find family firms fascinating is because you got very blurry lines. Think about Richard Branson, partly owned by the Branson family and a foundation. And what is really business? What is personal? What is Richard? What is his daughter, his son? What is all of it? And you find very often blurry lines, but that's also what excites me about family business. Next slide. Because family business is a force for a lot of things. First of all, it's a majority of the world's firms. They employ a lot of people. It's a large part of GDP, depending on where you are in the world. A lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of innovation, a lot of next generation energy involved with the complexity I'm going to come back to. There are family offices around it. And also what we're going to discuss today, kind of sustainable impact, whether that's philanthropy, whether it's technology, whether it's social impact and business impact, societal impact. That's why I find family businesses really are very, very fascinating on a global scale. So very, very excited to be here today. Next slide. Now, it's not easy to be a family firm. Imagine the first generation entrepreneur. He or she, very dedicated, got his or her personality completely embedded into it and created this magic company that grew over the years and his or her lifetime. Now, when the second generation comes in, how do you pass it over to the cousins, to your daughter, to your sons? Maybe you share it with your sisters, siblings. How does that dynamic play out? And it doesn't always play out well. They tend to manage it somehow, but again, we're getting a little away from the original founder, right? And in the third generation, that's a Chinese proverb here, that you see that the third generation, often not always, would actually drive the business into the fence or not be as successful as the first generation. The good thing is there's hope, because according to a couple of academic research papers, it's only 3 to 5% of the third generation companies that will move into the fourth generation. So of all the 100 that you saw originally throughout 3 generations, only a few percentage of them would actually survive. But once you do survive, you learn to renew yourself. And there's a big probability that you can actually stay on for a long time. And even here in the Nordics and across Europe and the world, we have companies that are very, very old. Next slide. So how do we manage a family firm? We need to kind of desiccate it today and get it into a couple of components. Here's a very famous model where you see there's a family first, who is the owner and who is working in the business. Think about the first generation entrepreneur. He or she is family, is owner, and works in the business. Now, once you get the next generation, or you got a brother and a sister and maybe another founder involved, you might be part of the family, but you may not be an owner, because you might not inherit the shares when you're 15 or 20 years old. You might even wait very long. And is it based on merit that even though you're not an owner, but you're a family, that you're going to work in the business? So as a board member, and you will find yourself completely immersed into that, even though what you are tasked to do is to work on the business, the family issues and the ownership issues, that's sometime for another day. But when you are in a family firm, you need to work on that. Next slide. So we need to look at family firms, I would say, from 5 different perspectives. I'm going to bring a model today that you will see in a second. The first one is family. With that comes all the aspirations. With that comes, how does a family grow over the years? What are the values of the family? Where do we want to take it? What's our place in society? Think about some of the big firms that we have here in the Nordic. Think about the Wallenbergs in Sweden. It crosses many generations. We got Peter here today, comes from an old family firm. So the family is really what's the backdrop of it. Now, who's going to own it? Who's part of the partnership? And then it comes to the business portfolio, where you as board members are finding yourself all the time, because this is what we are tasked to do. And then we got the family office, because sometimes when you span several generations, the family has accumulated cash, has accumulated real estate. Part of the ownership might be part of the family office. So often you will see the family office, or a holding kind of structure, depending on how you name it, would also be a very important part of it. And then when we're going to discuss today, impact, and I put this kind of broad word on it. Why? Because you will see later, next generation, for example, are very involved with impact. So this could be a way to look at it. And if you go to the next slide, that's kind of my model when it comes to family firms, where on top you often find a very strong purpose, A lot of family firms, if not all of them, are at least originally driven by a very strong purpose. And they came out of a very societal attachment. We have it here in the Nordics. You look at the Danish, Norwegians, Finnish, and Swedish firm. There was a reason why they originally set their businesses up. And then we got to look at strategies for each of these different silos. And you're also going to look at stakeholders and brands and all that. So that could be somehow one way to look at a family business structure. And it's a model that I use very often when I work with family firms, not only here in the Nordics, but across around 40 countries every year. Is a good way to get into the discussion, because each of the family firms, they have their own intricacies. So you need to kind of look into the different details in terms of where the firms are. Next slide. So when it comes to family firms, there are a lot of dilemmas and there are a lot of challenges, and you face that as board members right on the first day on the job, because first of all, it's about growth, but it's also about family harmony. And think about the first 2 points when it comes to the family. The family, I mean, the family interest could actually dictate business strategy, but is that the best for the business or is it for the family? It could also be the corporate strategy is so strong sometimes because you might have a very strong founding entrepreneur or a bunch of entrepreneurs, owners in the family that are very strong, but is it really what's in the interest of the family? Which could be longevity, which could be certain values, footprint in society, things we do, things we don't do. And then you got this issue, which is a very strong one, and you will find that self as board members as well, that the business grows far slower than the family talent. So what does it mean in terms of dividends? It doesn't matter too much in the first, second, and third generation, but over time you see a lot of fights. There will be a lot of conflicts because you might find yourself that you cannot live off from the family firm. You actually have to supplement with a job outside, and that can create a lot of tension, and vice versa. What happens if the business grows very fast, is very successful? Do we have family members that can work in the firm? Should they lead the firm? Should they sit on the board, or have we come to a point where we need to have external people involved here? So that leads us to the next one. Next slide. Where does this sustainability fit in here? And I think it's very interesting. And I spent a fair bit of time looking at it, because are family firms more involved in sustainability, or are they less involved? The question is, it really depends. The good news is we are very well off here in the Nordic region, because sustainability, climate, I would say the way of life, welfare societies, responsibilities and values, I mean, are deeply, deeply embedded in the region, but that's not the case everywhere in the world. So we have to be a little careful to make these notions that sustainability and impact is just a kind of an embedded part of the family firm. There's a good reason to suggest that it is, because if you look at some of the kind of the good things here that I put here is stewardship, family values, that tend to be a very long-term determination. If you ask the Wallenbergs, and if you ask the family behind the Lego family in Denmark and so forth, the Kone owners in Finland, you will find that owners really want the firm to stay for a long time. And where you have that kind of long-term mission, that also means that you're very dedicated to be around as a good corporate citizen in society. And you came from that local society in the first place, even though you found yourself being a very global firm by nature, and you're institutionalized and you have a lot of professional people on board. On the other side, you have all the conflicts. You have conflicts in the family about values. You have a lot of these private socio-emotional wealth issues, which is all about, would I dedicate resources into innovation? Would I take a kind of a short-term haircut in order to get the upside in the future? Because I might need that dividend right now. I might want to share it with my kids, and I don't like my brother. You see, you have all these conflicts, and sometimes that can kind of hamper the intention to go into sustainability, because sustainability is not necessarily free of charge. Doesn't have to be a big investment, but it's dedicated resources in a firm, and you're going to allocate between a lot of different choices. Which choices are you going to do? So my point is here, as a board member in a family firm, I mean, it's not pretty all the time, and you're going to navigate yourself not only on the business issues, and remember that in the middle of my model, because that's basically what we hear as a board member sitting on the board. We're working in this vertical. I'm part of this firm. We're in this industry. These are our segments. This is where we operate. But often you have all these kind of inherent emotional, much more invisible signals and drivers and conflict that you're also going to navigate when you work with that. Two perspectives. Next slide. The first one is that there's a good reason to suggest in a lot of family firms, think about it, they got the name on the back of the product. Think about the Taittinger champagne here. You have it around the world because a lot of different companies look about Lavazza or Illy coffee from Italy. You got the family name stamped on the product. And I can guarantee you, whether you are kind of the older generation from the first generation or whether you're kind of the younger siblings, if you got your family name stamped on the product and the service and the solution and the company door, there's strong evidence to suggest that you really want to keep it up. And of course, as sustainability being such a strong driver, your reputation is on the line. And I think that driver is a very strong one that suggests that people will keep it up. The second one to think about as a board member, next slide, is to think about the next generation. There's a lot of mention that I have a role at INSEAD. I'm a distinguished fellow there. Part of my job at INSEAD is to mentor a lot of our next generation family members. And I probably meet more than 100 to 150 next generation students at INSEAD and alum, by the way. And what I see is next generation do want to come back to the family firm, but just in the last 5 years, I've seen the change. They want to come back, but they want to come back if it's in a sustainable way. This kind of sustainability, humanity, society, the kind of the political reasons, the world at large is very much at the notion of the next generation. And often they want to have a say, they want to have a seat at the table. And part of that is not all about impact. And they often ask me about impact. Martin, how do I drive impact? Is it back in the firm in Israel? Is it returning to Canada? Or should I set up my own company? And I often encourage them and said, wait a minute, on the backbone of that huge enterprise, and I know you got those issues with mom and dad and your two uncles, because it isn't easy all the time to come back as next gen. Why don't you bring impact in? Why don't you make that your mission and you're working on it? I know technology is changing in your company because I saw that from the public news here, but why don't you bring that in? So what I'm saying here is not that the senior generation, the owning generation is not into impact. They are, and they're very powerful. And by the way, they got the vote. And they will vote with their hands and the money and the seniority. But as a board member, don't forget to make those alliances with next gen. And next gen is not only like a 20, 30-year-old. I mean, you can still be in your 50s and being next gen, waiting in line to get the key to the car. So you could actually forge some very strong alliances here. Next slide. So it isn't easy all the time. And I think a very humble quote here from the late Kamprad here. There will be mistakes. So how do we mitigate it? How do we structure it? Next slide. Try to look at this governance model. In the middle, you'll find yourself. The blue is kind of the operating company. In the middle of it, there's a chair, the board of directors, and this is where you're going to find yourself. Maybe on one board, maybe on several boards. Now, what is so special about a family firm is that you have all these family members, and they are on the left-hand side. You see, and they could be very big. They could be so big so they have their own assembly. They have their own council, which is a subset of the large family, and it's not only about being maybe 30 people or 100 people. I mean, look at Wendel, which is one of the sponsors of our center at INSEAD. They have more than 1,600 shareholders. It's one of the old steel manufacturing families in France and now completely out of industry. But you need to have a subset of that. Then you got your committees and Next Gen Academy, all of that. But they're going to be responsible, and they're also going to own, and they're going to kind of navigate in what you do as a board member in the middle. And of course, you got the CEO, the management team, and all of that. And how do we navigate all of that? Isn't it just about business or sustainability? It is, but you also need to look at what is happening at the left-hand side. And this is not only like working for a company which is partly controlled by a pension fund, controlled on the public market, and many family firms are kind of public-private, but you often find the family has a very big say there. And that is not always based on rational issues. Next slide. So how do we navigate it? I think as a board member, to be very successful, not only on a family business board, and I think it's one of the most exciting things you can do, and we'll hear later from Peter and Lena for sure, and we'll have a good discussion with you guys. It is really about defining what role you want to take on the board. So coming in with maybe with a strong sustainability and impact mandate, which I think we don't really have to discuss here in the Nordics because it is an embedded fiber of business society. Your role on the board might change over time. It might change in parallel. Ask yourself, and I've just given you here like a patchwork, what role do I want to play on the board? Where do I fit in? And I think you will find yourself having to serve different roles. I mentioned before, there could be a very strong alliance with Next Gen. They're always looking for advice. They're looking for direction. They want to have it their way, but they also want to learn from someone that may not be mom and uncle. it could actually be one of the board members. So you can play very different roles here. Next slide. So how do you become an effective board member? I mean, it is really about doing first of all, gaining the trust of the owning family, of the chair. You could be the chair yourself. It happens in a lot of family firms. It is really about being outside, being inside, being critical, being an ally, being an ambassador. You're going to show the passion for what you do at the same time. You're going to be the one that's going to help the family balance between all these different issues. And of course, you're going to be close to them. You can only work very effectively in a family firm if you're close to the kind of the owning generations and the different generations and owners here, but also when you keep your own integrity. And this is where it becomes tricky, because you got a lot of emotions in the way. You're going to think about succession. And again, next gen sustainability is a big part of that. And of course, you're going to be aware of all the cultural differences that you find yourself all the time. Next slide. So family business and sustainability is a big part. Here you see a quote from Andrew Hoffman from Roche in Switzerland. He's a very big force at INSEAD. He's also one of our big donors here. But Andrew, and he's actually part of the Worldwide Nature Foundation, so he's also very much part into nature and society. He found, and I've seen it through a lot of webinars and conversation, that family firms is really, when it comes to sustainability and impact, it often is a very, very large part of it. So a good quote here from Andrew Hoffman to kind of sum it all up. Next slide. So for those of you interested, you will find that there are kind of, I'm working on 2 different books, one on family business strategy, how to get it right, and also one on the family office side. And the last slide here to sum it up, you'll find my email, and I encourage you to stay in contact, connect on LinkedIn, and also check out the articles. And you will find, I just put it, hopefully to all of you, you can download the presentation that you just had, do it now, do it later. I know there's a lot in the team. You're also going to send it out after the webinar. So this was my kind of opening on sustainability and impact and the exciting world of family firms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I think that getting this overview is totally invaluable, both because of the insight that you built up over many years, but also for getting us a bit of frame of the situation and what we're going to have. Now, it's time for you that is looking at this, the audience. We need your help now. We like to know what your perspectives are, and you will give us that, if you can, through either picking up another window at your computer or go to the phone, and there you go into www.menti.com, and you add the code 3903-4725. I will show the same thing on the next slide, so I will just, however, also start an introduction of our distinguished panel. And I'll start with Peter Ahlström. And Peter is one of these, both internals and externals out of family firms. So you are part of the Ahlström family conglomerate. And you're also part of several of those holding companies. However, as many families does, you went away and worked a lot in a number of other companies before you came back. You can add on this, but I seem to remember that you worked on Lidl, for instance, in the executive positions. And now you don't just sit on the family firms, you also sit as a non-executive director at Broman Group and at Vestas. So warm welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Honored.
And then I'd like to introduce Lena Hofsberger. So Lena is what I would call almost close to a professional chair. But prior to this, Lena has run several super large international companies, and that's kind of where she draws her insights from, very much in the services sector. And she is now the chair of Ambea, she's the chair of Leos Lekland, and she's the chair of Pharma Relations. But she also sits as a non-executive director at Max Burgers, which is a family firm. In fact, Pharma Relations is also a family firm, but it's her own. And she has, prior to this, also been sitting on several other very large family firms. So she's one of these that Martin talked about, trusted people, trusted Neds that comes in and works and manages to balance this thing. Now I want to ask Fernanda, have we got any answers to the Menti question? Thank you so much. So this is interesting and it keeps changing a bit. So the different areas that seems to be a bit more is that it fulfills the business purpose. It ensures renewal and corporate growth. And don't we all need that when everything is changing so much? And then, very interestingly enough, the reputation of both the company and the owners is at stake, which is, you can say, much more at stake on these companies. You can also say that engaging the younger family members comes up, and contributing to a better world, doing it just because it's right, is also there. So I want to start with actually just asking our panelists to comment on this first. Would you care to start, Peter? Is there something here that surprised you, or is it something that confirmed your perspective?
Thank you very much. And thanks also to Martin for your presentation. It was hard in just selecting 3 of these. and so, but I had, of those top, I had the reputation, which is for me also like on a daily matter. I always have to think about the reputation. It's not my own, but due to the company, and we have 400, we are almost 400 family members in the company. So I need to take extra caution about this part. This fulfill the family business purpose I think is really a crucial thing, and we will get back to that also. It's very that you have an ambition and you have a clear plan. What do you really want, and try to crystallize it both for yourself and for the family, but also then to communicate it further on. And the last, this contribute to a better world for future generation. I think that's really the key essence. We are working for our kids and for the world.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think it's interesting, and it gives one more dimension than maybe non-family firms can always have when you have your heart and your next generation so vividly in mind. Lena, warm welcome to the discussion here. Was there anything that you found specifically interesting in this one?
No, I think it's very interesting to see that growth, for instance, is a very important factor for why we should engage in sustainability. And it doesn't really matter if it's a family business or any other business. I think there are so many benefits coming from it. I'm not surprised to see that reputation or contribution to a better world, because that's my experience, are high also on the list. What surprises me actually is the low rating for employer branding, because it's my experience that it's very important when you want and are in a world where there's a lot of competition for talent. I think this is one of the most important factors really for value creation. So I'm surprised here that is ranked pretty low, but I'm so happy to see that there are so many reasons why to engage in sustainability in a proper way.
Right.
Now, I thought it was interesting that Martin concluded his presentation, and I think I'm sure he's right about it, but it's not so that family businesses are necessarily much better than other businesses when it comes to sustainability and how it's integrated in the business. Because I think that success in this area, whether it's family business or any other business, is that it is a logic approach depending on what type of industry and what type of company you are. If it's really logical to work very hard with sustainability, then the gains are very big, and companies are really engaging and going on such a trip. So I think the business logic is very important here.
But I think it's also interesting because it's like business logic where sustainability has one area of it. So I wanted to ask you about this, to have a sustainability focus. Can you say something on how you have experienced that it can help a bit on the renewal or the growth, or for that matter, the reputation? Do you have any examples of that? Do you want to comment, Peter?
Can you please pass it over first to
Yeah, sure.
I have to rephrase.
Absolutely. Lena, so if you think about how sustainability have helped some of your businesses that you've been working with, family businesses, in terms of growth and reputation?
Well, I see very clearly that the systematic sustainability approach that Max Burgers have taken for a very, very long time. And I think that is very key, because I think if you want to be successful in integrating sustainability in your business, you have to be very long-term. And I've seen Max Burgers' reputation growing. They won a lot of prizes globally. I've seen growth, tremendous growth. And Max Burgers is one of the most profitable restaurant companies in the world, globally, margin-wise. So I really can see the benefits, but I also see how logical it was for the company to go on this long journey and all the efforts that's been put into this journey. And I would like to come back to that, if I may, later.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome. Peter, do you want to comment?
Yes, well, this long time horizon that helps to mitigate that we can think about and making investments in these also. So it's really this long-term value and growth they sync well together, and I also think by focusing on sustainability, it can really bring also new ideas and business opportunities. And we have to think also about the value chain, not your own company, but talking about the whole value chain, and try to help our stakeholders in that matter. And of course, today, like you need to be think about sustainability. If you don't, you're a bad citizen, or you immediately get the bad reputation. So it's not an option today.
Right. So I think that is a really interesting thing. I wanted to ask you, and start with you, Peter, if it's possible. In the Nordics, actually not just in family firms, but we have it also in many private firms, we have owner directives. So as owners, you give a bit more clear directives to the boards, what you expect and how you look at this. So I wanted to hear, is that something you have? And in that, do you in any way mention sustainability?
Definitely. We talked about this a lot, and also in the sense of valuing. I mean, money. I mean, sometimes you need to give away a bit of your profit to do good things, but the owner directives and vision should be including in some sort of a sustainability policy in whatever firm it might be, and of course it's very important to have some sort of targets and clear what is the ambition, not only on climate focus, but also in general on ESG matters.
Right. Right. So Lena, this thing with owner directives, I mean, it's not that common on listed companies, but if you look at private companies and the family firms, it's a bit more common. Have you had that, and have you seen that?
In one of my companies that was included, and it was very clear. But in the company Max Burgers, which has really worked extremely harder than any other company that I know of for so many years, for so many decades, we don't have an owner's directive, but it's very clear without that owner's directive that that is an overriding ambition. So it doesn't always have to be so formal as a document.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking, I think I've heard you mention that your owner's directive, you can get a phone call in the late evening as an owner directive.
Absolutely. I mean, with family businesses, things, and Martin talked about it, things don't always happen only in office hours. They can happen any time of the day, but that also goes for other companies, of course. So it's a very vital cooperation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So Fernanda, I wanted to bring in our audience again. And we want them to take the next question on the Menti. And the question this time is, can you just name one word that you think is crucial from boards to raise the ambition of racing towards zero emission? What is it that boards need to know or need to do in order to raise the ambition of racing towards zero emissions? So just give us a word, and we'd like to see some words. So vision, courage. So now I bring in Martin. I thought you can just comment as this grows up, this world cloud.
Yeah, not surprising as we see the vision and kind of courage coming up. I mean, what's the single thing you need to do? What I think is an underlying thing for board members to do, and I kind of alluded to it. I mean, you're not going to befriend the family, and Lena said even on Sunday night you'll have these kind of calls. It's really about bringing sometimes owners and the company out of the comfort zone, because I think sustainability, and I see the questions from the audience, is not only like it's not a single thing, and it's an evolving target. What is sustainability today? It's a very different thing 3 or 5 years from now. So you should be willing to bring kind of the company and the family out of the comfort zone. I'm not trying to say you should confront them. And you see the word here now is changing a bit, future and innovation. That kind of alludes more on technology and processes, the way that we use resources, right? Purpose and vision kind of went away a little here. We see future innovation, vision came back here. So I think it's about the long future. Think about longevity. It's very much about renewal. And we talk about sustainability today, but I've told a lot of boards, 5 or 10 years from now, I don't think we talk about sustainability. We talked about industrialization. We talked about leadership around 100 years ago. We talked about a lot of things. But if you're a 200-year-old company, I know Alstrom, Peter's family background goes way back. You've been through so many things in history. So sustainability right now is one thing, but it has to be part of renewal. So it's about having that. What is it really that's going to do for us as a family and as a business and in relation to society? But it's not necessarily like a 100-year target. It might be very immediate. It might be very medium term until it's going to change later.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the audience. I kind of wanted to, if you don't want to comment directly, do you see an urge? Because otherwise I'll continue. I really wanted to know from Peter, kind of what expectations do you have on non-family board members in general, but also when it relates to sustainability, and how do you best onboard them?
Well, sometimes you cannot really distinguish between non-family or family, but I would say in general, the integrity is really, especially for the non-family members, to have this in mind all the time. And although how funny it might sound, but sometimes you shouldn't get too involved, to get too close to the family, because then you might not be able to make sound business decisions. Of course, you when you join as non-family member, you need to understand that all decisions cannot be taken only fact-based. There's so much emotions, and they are important. But regarding sustainability, the climate fluency, and try to understand, and that is not something that we can take for granted. It's something that we also need to train. I fully admit I'm not climate fluent enough. I need to understand when we talk about some that does it really mean. So this climate fluency is important, and I would say for a new board member, I think this induction has to be made as a serious induction. It's super important. Also taking into account history and personal history, and within our family we are also talking about our holy cows or our heirlooms. That these things they for example, we don't expect any returns on these, or don't touch this. This is a family matter.
Thank you so much, and that is also probably what Martin alluded to, things you need to know, things you need to respect. Lena, do you want to comment anything on being onboarded? And my question is, will you ever be offboarded? Or are you there?
Sorry, offboarded, what do you mean?
Will you ever leave, or are you always kind of part and support and take calls from the boards even if you leave them when it's family businesses?
Well, that's my nature with all businesses. I can't see I can't see where work starts and where work finishes.
Yeah.
Or work and play goes together for me as well. It doesn't. I think my work is so interesting, but that's just my personal attitudes.
Yeah, it's a luxury, somebody said, when work is your hobby.
Yes, but I really would like to comment, if I may, of what I meant when sustainability is really integrated into the core of the business and it's pure business logic. And I would like to use Max as an example. I could have used Löfbergs Coffee as an example as well, because it's quite similar. But you know all that burgers normally are made from beef. And cows are really a big problem when it comes to CO emission. And 15, 20 years ago, the family behind burgers sat down and they said, okay, this is a big problem. We are part of a big problem, but we don't want to be part of a problem. We want to be part of a solution of the problem. And that's how they embarked on this journey. And the first step was we have to compensate for the problem that we cause. So all the emissions were compensated by planting wood, trees. But the next step was to say, well, if we can reduce the ratio of beef-made burgers to half, then we have halved our problem. So during the past 15 years, we have worked on that. And for one of the steps was to introduce a plant-made burger. And you can, I'm sure you realize that's a big job, and it took years and years because it has to be tasty as well, not only made by plants. And another step was to really drive the business through chicken. Today, the target is that we should reduce beef as an ingredient to 50%. We are now in the early 40%. It has taken so many years, and there are so many other activities, but I really wanted to say is for Max Burgers, it's a question perhaps of survival long term.
Investment for the future.
Yes.
For the future.
Yes.
I think that's one.
And then I really think that working with sustainability, that adds a lot of value, and it works. So today it's integrated in everything we do. When we plan a menu, when we make a change of the smallest thing, of course, sustainability is integrated. And I know also that the employees are very proud, and that's why I made the comment before, because I think that it's vital for our for being competitive on the talent market, really to be sustainable.
Right. So I wanted to bring in Cecilia to hear. Do we have any questions in the Q&A, Cecilia?
Yes, we do. And actually one of them ties into all of the discussion about sustainability and how the panelists actually define it, because to many people, it means actually slightly different things. So please, if you could just make a quick comment on, or actually it's not quick, but some comment on how you see it from your perspective.
Right. And
Uh,
I think it's a very broad question.
It is.
Yeah. But I think it entails, I guess, environment, social, and then also being in governance and control over. So it's actually very close to the ESG. Is that right? Is that how you would look at it, Peter?
Yes, we always take the whole package, people, profit, planet. And we've tried then to also in phrasing it and try really to compress it and understand. And so we are talking about really a better world for future generation. So that is the owner's wish. And then how we've implemented more then into the business, and then so a better world for future generations through sustainable value creation. Because that's, of course, the business has to be profitable. So we combine these things, and this sits very well.
I tend to use sustainability together with impact. I think that forces it a bit stronger. You can be sustainable in economics, long-term capital, society, resources, ocean, humanity, but what impact does it drive? Just because you're sustainable, so what? It drives impact. And of course, we used to be like very much in this kind of stakeholder capitalism, and now we have a much broader view of the economy. So think about impact. What difference does it make in society and to the world?
Thank you. We have another question. And that's related to next generation and how they see governance and sustainability, and the role of the board compared to earlier generations. Do you feel there is a difference between them? And if so, what?
I could start. I think next generation has always been into governance, because that's one way to get your uncle and your auntie to partly step away and also get visibility of my own future. Am I going to pour my entire life into it? When you're 30, 40, 45, 50 years old, next generation, and you finally make the choice to go back into the family firm, for example, this is not a fling for 3 years. This is a lifetime commitment, and it's a one-way street. So you want to make sure that you have a certain visibility, and the board actually can be your biggest ally. So I think they're very strongly into it. And I think with kind of the modern next gens, which are very traveled, well adverse, they like the governance part, because they see it as not for the sake of governance, because who cares about it? It's actually a part of the corporate renewal.
I would say it's really a great way for next gen to get in, and really a challenge. And our next gen, they made a challenge to the whole family in a non-plastic week. It sounds, but if you imagine, if going to a grocery store, so much is packed today in plastic. I mean, it was really a eye opener and that was really came not asked, it came automatically from them. It was really inspiring.
Very good, very interesting.
You could also argue very briefly that, I mean, as next gen, you have 3+1 roles to play. The last one, the one is not to join the family business at all. Then you can either be operative, you can sit on the board, or you can become a responsible owner. Maybe in the past, you just joined the business, and we know you started as a junior janitor in the warehouse. But today, when you sit on the board or you become a responsible owner, look at the Lego family. They only have one representative from the family on the board. The rest of it are all professionals. Maybe that's where you can drive real impact by not only being operative, but maybe sit on the board or becoming a responsible owner. That might have changed slightly in the mindset of the next gen.
Right. So I actually wanted to bring in back Fernanda. We need our audience here again. So now we want to ask you on the Menti, if we can get that, Fernanda, what you can do as individuals, either because you sit on a board or you can help a board understand. So what can you do to raise the ambition on the climate change transition from the board perspective? So it's particular to the board perspective. Think about that. So we'd love to see if you have some input for us here. What do you think you can do to help raise the ambition on the climate change transition? And meanwhile, we will start to see things coming up here. I wanted to go back and then ask Lena. I know that you also work with private equity. So I just wanted you to comment on what do you think family boards can learn from private equity and vice versa?
Well, I think the ideal would be to combine family businesses and private equity, because I think those are the two best owner forms that I have experienced. And that is also very often what happens when private equity goes into family firms, take over part of the equity, and they work together. I think when it comes to sustainability, I think that family firms have the advantage of taking a longer perspective, and sustainability is a long perspective work when it really is extremely successful. I mean, it's about 10, 15, 20, 30 years. That's where you really see the fantastic payoff that I was referring to from Max, but I could also talk about other companies. So I think their private equity as owners are not really on the same playground, because their perspective is shorter, 5-10 years. But together, I think these two owner types create magic.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
If there's just a few 30 seconds more for, I mean, part of our group also is private equity in private investments. And I would say earlier the PE business was always to buy cheap, develop and sell high. But today I think you can change the model also and as you are have experiences to, let's say, buy dirty, and people where you see there is a possibility for sustainability and sustainable change, and then try to gain out of that. So sell clean. If you understand what I mean.
And it's quite clear that's on the top of the agenda of private equity companies. Sustainability is one of the two top items. The other one is digital change.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted one last 30-second comment from Peter and Lena on what we're seeing here, or if there are things you think we should add. What can we do to raise the ambition on the climate change transition from the board perspective?
Lena, you start, I read.
Well, what I would like to raise is that I think it's, and I think that's a very good and important point, I think it's very profitable to work with sustainability of all types. It really pays off. And I'm glad that that is the case, because there's no, from that point of view, there's no reason why you shouldn't.
I'll try to really phrase it so really to have a clear communication then to the operative business. I think that's important, and make a clear follow-up. Yeah.
And which actually goes back to this thing around the definition. I mean, you have to find your own agreement across. What is it that's important? Thank you so much, Peter and Lena. It was great to be having a chance to follow your perspectives, and also thanks to the audience. I wanted to have Martin give us the last couple of minutes to kind of conclude now, if you can.
Oh, so much has been covered, so it's kind of good to give it a shot here. I think we covered a lot of good grounds here. Think about the Nordic governance model as a backdrop of all of it. I think we are in a very good place. The problem is, or the challenge is, how do we frame it? Are we at the beginning of the journey? Are we in the middle of the journey? Are we kind of the latter part? Sustainability and impact, of course, is a big theme in Nordic, as it is everywhere in the world. I even see some of the questions from the Q&A with NextGen and sustainability and impact. So I think there's a lot of things to be done. We saw in the beginning the purpose, renewal, and reputation were kind of big drivers. So how do you as a board go in there? I think you need to dare to change. And this is what is critical serving on a family business board, because maybe in contrast to a kind of an ordinary public listed board, you have more emotions in the way. And emotions are probably one of the strongest drivers of change, but it is also a source of conflict and mistrust and all of that. So you really need to navigate very carefully if you want to bring in, if you want to enhance further You don't want to just be the echo camper for the founding or the owning family. You also want to be the best critic, the critic that they know then that when the chair calls you up, that you might even contrast the chair and say, I think this is not good enough. I think you need to elevate the game and all of that. But at the same time, you also need to be kind of a catalyst for change. And I think very often in family business boards, you need to deal, and that's difficult. You need to deal with the elephants in the room, and we have elephants on all boards, and people are playing different roles here, because you have two things in the family business board. You got the agency cost, which is really what priorities would I make because I have the power to do it, and also this socio-emotional wealth perspective that I alluded to in terms of how would I prioritize just behalf of my own family and not with my uncle and my aunt and my siblings and all of that. So that can sometimes coming in the way here. Then it's also, I think as a board member, be very careful to, and maybe you're gonna be the controlling function here to think about that there are actually well-documented biases between how we think as business about sustainability and what we actually do. And that bias can sometimes come in the way. One thing that I find with family firms, and that's why I like about them, they generally tend to be very humble. And you might actually want to elevate that conversation, because business families in general, because of wealth, because of security, because of tax, because of a lot of issues, maybe political, past, anything, they tend to be a little more quiet about what they do and what they are up to. They just do it. For example, in Asia, you don't really brag about your wealth. You don't brag about that you paid for the schools or you even do sustainability. That's just the way we do business. So I think as a board member, you're also there to elevate the conversation and sometimes make it a little more public, not to brag about it, but maybe that's a way to get forces underway, not only for that firm you're serving on, but for kind of society at large. So think about sustainability. For me, it's about renewal, and we discussed it, I think, in great length, because when you look at these old firms, we did a report at INSEAD. There's a French-based organization, but it encompasses more than 80 members from all over the world. It's called the Hinoktians, and they had two things in common. First of all, they're more than 200 years. Two, you got the business family involved in one way or the other. And there's around 80 plus members, and there are way more Hinoktians in the world. What they have been very good at is renewal. They lived through cholera, wars, economic downturns, fallouts, kings, politicians. It went up and down over the years, but what they have been very good is renewal. So think about sustainability not as environment, not as humanity, not as society, not as capital. Think about it in a much, much larger perspective, because maybe the biggest mandate you have as a board member in a family firm is renewal and long-term survival. I've yet to come across a chair in a business family that said, no, Martin, we're here to build, scale, manage, and sell. They never divest. I mean, they do. Family firms divest for a lot of good reasons, by the way. They trim the firm. They realize we are not in retail and we're going to sell out. But they are here for the long term. And I think your mandate as a board member is really to be maybe the biggest custodian and guardian of longevity and prosperity in the long term. See sustainability and see sustainable impact in that light.
Thank you so much. And we have also asked our communication partner Prime. They will do a blog post about our conversation here today, and they will also interview you. So we encourage everybody to come back and meet with us. And with that, I hand it back over to you, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Liselotte. First of all, my own personal sincere gratitude to our distinguished panel, Lena Hofsberger, Peter Ahlström, and Martin Røhl. What a tour de force into all the strengths, but also some of the often overlooked challenges that lies within running a family business and trying to encompass the larger picture of also trying to be a sustainable business. Absolutely brilliant. I also want to thank our audience for being part of this, and obviously our operations committee and our board within the board's impact forum. Without you, it simply couldn't be possible for us to do this. You probably know our business model is depending on sponsorships and grants, and we are absolutely in debt of gratitude to our strategic partners, FCG Group, DLA Piper, Prime Weber Shandwick, the Swedish Academy of Board Directors, Boardman, and Board Network. Thank you so much. Please, the last slide. Because on the last slide, I would like to reiterate what I mentioned in the beginning. We do hope that if you haven't already, please sign up as a member or supporter to the Boards Impact Forum. It's on boardsimpactforum.com/join us. Also, please, if you like, follow us on the communication channels of LinkedIn and Twitter. And finally, I want to draw your attention to two upcoming webinars on June 30th on sustainability leadership, which we join in collaboration with the Climate Governance Initiative chapter of Malaysia. So we're looking very much forward to that. We will, among others, have Henrik Henriksson, the CEO of Scania, and also on the board of Electrolux, and Elaine Wiedmann Grunewald, who's the a board member of Sweco, and a former chief sustainability officer of Ericsson present. So looking very much forward to that. On August 26th, we will have another very interesting webinar on the competence for strategic sustainable business with Lisa Kingo, who is, among other, a board member of Sanofi, Arne Karlsson, who sits on a number of boards and is also the chair of the Swedish Corporate Governance Committee, and Mette Morsing, who is a professor and actually heads up the UN Global Compact academic initiative. So very, very strong panel. We are looking very much forward to that. So for me, thank you so much. And I want to end up with the note of gratitude and thank you to you, Liselott. You are the driving force behind the Nordic the Boards Impact Forum, and you put in so much time, energy, and effort to it. So huge thanks for making that possible to all of us. Thank you so much. You are muted. There you go.
Thank you so much to all of the audience, and a special warm thanks to Martin and Lena and Peter for sharing your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the way and hope to see you on June 30th.
Take care.